If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to. I've never really believed in ghosts. Not in the way movies or books talk about them. I'm practical, grounded. The kind of person who leaves a light on at night. Not because I'm scared, but because it's just easier to see where I'm going. That's who I've always been. But something happened a few years ago that I still haven't been able to explain. And the more time passes, the more it unsettles me. It didn't feel like a big moment when it happened. In fact, it was quiet, almost forgettable. But it stuck. And now it won't let go. We were visiting my mom, me, my wife, and our 4-year-old son. My mom still lives in the same house I grew up in. A quiet place, just on the edge of town. It's an old house with creaky floors and narrow hallways. The kind of place that smells like coffee and old wood. Being there always brought back memories for me. Nothing strange, just nostalgia. My son had only been there a few times, but from the moment we arrived, he acted like he knew the place, like it was familiar. He'd run through the hallway, laughing, sometimes stopping to stare into corners, like he was expecting someone to be there. At one point, I found him in the living room, facing the empty armchair by the window. He was smiling, nodding, like he was listening. Then he whispered something and laughed softly to himself. I asked who he was talking to. He looked up at me and said, "My friend." That made me pause, but not in a serious way. I figured he was pretending, as kids do. I smiled and asked him what his friend's name was. He just shook his head and said, he doesn't like names. The way he said it was so casual, so matter-of-fact. Not like a game. It wasn't silly or playful. It felt real to him. That's when something shifted in me. I don't even know how to explain it, but it felt like the air in the room suddenly got thicker, like the kind of silence that presses on your ears. Later that evening, while we were having dinner, my son suddenly asked, "Can we make space for my friend?" We all looked around. The table was full, just the 4 of us, and no one was standing nearby. I asked, "Where is he?" And my son pointed to the empty chair next to him. "He's already sitting," he said. I could feel my wife tense beside me. My mom just gave me a strange look and didn't say anything. I asked him again, trying to keep my voice light. "What does your friend look like?" He took a bite of food, chewed slowly, then said, "He's old. He wears soft clothes. He said he used to sit by the window all the time." That's when my mom's fork paused midair. She stared at him for a second, but didn't speak. That night, we tried to put my son to sleep in the guest room at the end of the hall. He refused, and not in a dramatic, whining kind of way. He just went quiet. Then he looked at me and said, "He told me not to sleep in there." I asked, "Who did?" "My friend," he said. "He said he doesn't go in that room anymore." That sentence didn't sit right with me. I couldn't sleep after that. Every creak in the house felt louder. The hallway outside our room felt darker than I remembered. There was something about the way my son had said it. Like it wasn't just pretend anymore. Like there were rules, boundaries, things he had to follow. And he understood them better than I did. The next morning, we packed up early. We said our goodbyes and headed out to the car. The sun was bright. The sky was clear. Everything felt normal again. My son seemed fine, back to his energetic self. He got into his car seat. I started the engine, and then he said, "Wait, I forgot something." Before I could react, he unbuckled himself and jumped out of the car. I followed him quickly, calling his name. He ran back up to the house, straight to the front steps. He stopped, looked at the doorway, and waved. Then he said, "Bye, old man. See you next time." There was no one there. The house was empty. The door was open. the hallway dark, but he looked right into it, smiling, like he was saying goodbye to someone he could clearly see. I felt this cold knot form in my stomach. I looked at my mom, and she looked pale. She wasn't surprised. She looked resigned. I asked her what that was about, but she just shook her head and told me we should get on the road. She didn't say a word until later that week, when I called her. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I asked her directly, did she know what he was talking about? She was silent for a moment, then sighed. He described your father, she said. The way he sat, the clothes he wore, the way he used to wave at you from that same doorway. My dad died before my son was born. We never showed him pictures, never really talked about him to someone that young. There was no reason he would know those details. Then my mom added, I've felt him here sometimes. Not often, but I know when he's around. It's not scary, just present, like he's watching, but from a distance. Her voice cracked a little when she said that, not from fear, from emotion, like someone who'd been living with something quiet for a long time, something she never told anyone. We haven't been back since. My mom still lives there. She says the house feels peaceful most of the time, but every once in a while, she hears footsteps. Slow, even, like someone pacing the hallway. But she's alone. A few months after that visit, we were watching a movie together, me, my wife, and our son. There was a scene where a character talks about ghosts. My son turned to me and said, "Ghosts don't like it when people pretend they're not real." I asked, "Who told you that?" He shrugged, looking away. The old man. I didn't know what to say. I still don't. I try to tell myself it was all just imagination. That kids say things they don't understand. But deep down, I know what I saw on my son's face that day. I know what I felt in that house. And even now, when it's late at night and the house gets quiet, I sometimes find myself listening for footsteps in the hall. Not because I believe, but because I can't forget. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond. I never thought I'd share this, mostly because it's not even my story, it's my mother's. But it's one of those things that gets passed down like a scar you can't see, the kind that never really stops aching. She grew up in the interior of Brazil, way out where the paved roads end and the woods begin. Her house sat between miles of farmland and a thick stretch of forest people around there, just called O Mato. No one really named it. No one wanted to. Out there, when the sun goes down, it's like the world folds in on itself. No streetlights, no phone signal, just dirt paths, insects loud enough to drown out your thoughts, and the sound of your own breath if you're unlucky enough to walk alone. She used to take that path through the woods to get to church, not because she was especially religious, but because back then, Sunday nights were the only chance to see other people, catch up, feel like part of something. And for the longest time, she never believed in what people whispered about those woods. She thought it was just rural superstition. You know, the kind old folks repeat over coffee, but don't really believe. Until one night, when everything changed. It was a Sunday like any other. The air was hot still. Crickets screamed in the trees. She left the house a bit late that evening, and by the time she got to the path, it was already dusk. The kind of dusk where the light fades faster than you think it should, and every shadow looks like it wants to follow you. The trail was narrow, surrounded by trees so thick the branches locked together overhead like fingers. She'd walked it 100 times, but that night she told me it felt wrong, like the woods were holding their breath. She didn't stop. She didn't slow down, just kept walking, clutching her little purse with her prayer book inside, staring straight ahead. And that's when she saw it, a bull, just standing in the middle of the trail. But not just any bull, this one was golden. She said it looked like it had been dipped in molten metal. Its hide shimmered, not like fur catching the light, but like actual gold, glowing faintly even in the dimness. It wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, just standing there with its head slightly lowered, staring at her. At first, she thought maybe her eyes were playing tricks. Maybe the moonlight was bouncing off something. But then it tilted its head, not like an animal, more like a person studying something they don't understand. That's when the fear hit her. She turned and ran. Her legs moved before her mind did. She didn't even think about it, just turned back the way she came and bolted. But the woods didn't feel the same anymore. The path was darker, the air thicker, like something had shifted the moment she turned her back on that thing. She told me the first thing she noticed was the smell, not like soil or wet leaves. Something worse, rotting flesh, wet dog fur, sulfur. It clung to her skin and filled her lungs, made her gag mid-run. It was like the woods themselves were exhaling something foul, and it was following her. Then she heard it. Movement, but not from behind her, beside her. Like something big was keeping pace in the trees, just out of sight. Crunching leaves, snapping twigs, heavy breathing, slow and steady, the way a predator breathes when it knows you can't get away. She didn't dare look. She just kept running, feet pounding the trail, until she saw the small wooden bridge that led to the churches, clearing up ahead. She thought, if I can just get to the other side. But as she neared it, something stepped out onto the trail. Not a bull this time. Something else. She doesn't have a name for it. She calls it the demon, but she admits even that doesn't feel right. It stood upright, hunched over like its spine wasn't built for walking straight. Its skin was dark, not black, but a sickly, dried blood color. Its hair stood straight up from its head in jagged tufts, like it had been electrocuted. And its eyes, they glowed yellow. Not reflected, glowed, like lanterns buried deep in its skull. But what she remembers most, what she swears she'll never forget, was the smell. It wasn't just foul. It was ancient, like something that had crawled out of a grave, still carrying the dirt and rot with it. It stung her nose and coated her tongue, made her feel like she was breathing through a wet rag soaked in death. And still it didn't move. It just watched her. She couldn't scream, couldn't move, just stood there, heart pounding, while that thing stared at her with its burning eyes. Then it tilted its head, just like the bull. Same exact movement. That's when she realized it wasn't two creatures. It was the same thing, or two sides of the same thing. She didn't know. Still doesn't. She says she felt something then. Not a voice, not words, but something inside her head, like thoughts that weren't hers, slipping into her mind. Shapes, sounds, broken pieces of language that didn't belong to any tongue she'd ever heard. Then it raised one arm, like it was about to point, but it didn't. Instead, it turned around and backed into the woods, walking backward, never once breaking eye contact. She doesn't remember much after that, just that she eventually reached the church, collapsed on the floor just inside, and couldn't speak for a while. People said she must have had a panic attack. Heat stroke. They brushed it off. But her clothes smelled. Even after washing them twice, the stink clung to them. She ended up burning the dress she wore that night. She never walked that trail again. Even now, all these years later, she doesn't talk about it unless she wakes up shaking in the middle of the night. The thing is, I used to think maybe it was just a story, a trauma response, something her mind cooked up to explain fear she couldn't process. But a few months ago, I went back to that area. The house is still there, though barely standing. And that trail still cuts through the trees, still leads to the church. I took it once, just to see, just to feel what she might have felt. Nothing happened. No golden bull, no smell, no glowing eyes in the brush. But right before I reached the bridge, I looked down, and there, pressed into the dirt, were hoof prints. Not horse, not cow. Too smooth, too perfect. Deep in the center, like something heavy had stood there, perfectly still. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell anyone. But I didn't take that trail back. I took the long way around, because something tells me you're not supposed to see it twice. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to be. It was just supposed to be another quiet night at home. My husband and my in-laws had gone out to a church event, and I had decided to stay behind. I had some studying to catch up on, and I figured I could relax and watch a movie after. It was one of those rare evenings where the house felt empty, but peaceful. Just me, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the warmth of the kitchen lights. Everything was calm. The world outside my window blanketed in darkness. It was the kind of night you could lose yourself in. I was sitting at the kitchen table, going over some notes for an upcoming exam, when a sudden craving hit me. Fries. It was the simplest thing, but at that moment, I couldn't stop thinking about them. The only problem was that I had finished the last of the frozen fries earlier in the week, so I was left with nothing but a couple of regular potatoes. No big deal, I thought. I could just slice them up and fry them myself. I've done it a million times before. As I began slicing the potatoes, the sound of the sharp knife cutting through the flesh seemed to echo in the silence of the house. I was focused, trying to get everything just right. But then I heard it, an unmistakable sound, the gate opening. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough. My husband was back early, I thought. I didn't think much of it at first. He was probably just coming home from the event. I glanced toward the front door. There was no knock, no footsteps, just the sound of the gate creaking open, and then silence. I felt a strange shiver run down my spine, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe I was just getting anxious about my upcoming exams. After all, I had been cooped up in the house all day, studying and working, without much contact with the outside world. I continued slicing the potatoes, but then something happened that made my blood run cold. I felt it, the presence. It was behind me, so close that I could almost feel its breath on the back of my neck. I thought it was my husband, maybe sneaking up to surprise me with a hug. He does that sometimes. He'll come up behind me and wrap his arms around me in a playful embrace. But this time it wasn't him. I spun around, knife still in hand, my heart racing in my chest. There was nothing, no one standing there. The door was still closed, and there was no sign of anyone having entered. But the air felt heavier. My body felt like it was being watched, as if someone had been standing right behind me, just a breath away. I couldn't shake the feeling. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I had been staring at the same spot on the wall for too long. But the unease gnawed at me. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I've had other strange experiences in this house. Little things that never made sense. It's probably just some old superstition, I thought. But even so, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread growing in my chest. I shook it off and went back to what I was doing. I had to finish cutting the potatoes and get the fries made. I couldn't let my nerves get the best of me. Not when I was so close to finally getting some food. But as I stood there, frying the potatoes, the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it only grew stronger. It was as though the room had become heavier, the walls closer, the shadows darker. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the sizzle of the fries in the oil, but it was hard to concentrate. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't on the floor. It was on the far side of the kitchen, near the doorway. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. For a split second, I thought it was my husband coming back, but no. He would have come through the door. And this shadow wasn't right. It was too quick, too fluid, as if something, or someone, was moving just outside of my vision. I slowly turned my head, my eyes scanning the darkness of the hallway. There was nothing there, nothing but the stillness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been standing there, watching me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I had just seen. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by something in the room. But then I thought about it more, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The shadow had been too deliberate, too purposeful. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to acknowledge what was happening. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. Something, or someone was here. Something I couldn't see, but could feel all around me. I glanced toward the kitchen door, half expecting to see someone standing there. But no one was there. The house was silent, and the shadows stretched long and dark along the walls. I stood there, frozen, as the unease settled deep into my bones. It wasn't the first time I had experienced something like this. I've always been a little superstitious, always had a sense that there was something in this house, something old, something not quite right. But tonight felt different. This time, the feeling wasn't fleeting. It was persistent, like something was watching me, waiting for me to acknowledge its presence. The shadows in the room seemed to grow deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I slowly began to walk toward the hallway, my steps deliberate, careful. As I passed the doorway, I glanced down the dark hall. There was no sound, no movement, just the heavy silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I couldn't help but wonder, what if this wasn't the first time? What if the presence I had felt before, the one that had been so fleeting and so difficult to understand, was more than just a random feeling? What if it had always been here, lurking just outside of my perception, waiting for me to finally notice? I didn't want to turn around, but I couldn't stop myself. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing right behind me. But there was nothing, just the kitchen, just the stillness. But I could feel it, deep down. It was there. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Fear and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Here, you'll find more real stories filled with mystery, psychological horror, and the supernatural every week. Before you go, make sure to check out the 2 videos that just popped up in the end screen. I promise, they'll leave you with goosebumps. See you next time, if you dare.